Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Annick Glaude, and I'm the curator at the Varley Art Gallery of Markham. It's my pleasure to be here today and welcome Luke Parnell to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm thrilled to be joining you from the Varley Art Gallery of Markham, where I do come in once a week to check on things, especially the exhibitions and Luke's work in particular. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the Varley Art Gallery is on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples, the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, and also recognize that the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and the Indigenous community in closest proximity to us, the Chippewas of our Georgina Island First Nation. We'd also like to acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly those who are descendants from those brought here through enslavement. Thank you very much for joining us. So if this is your first time joining our Lunch and Learn, these talks are informal artist talks that provide our community members with the opportunity to learn about current or future exhibitions, as well as hear about ongoing curatorial research. So the gallery is closed right now, but we have 4 wonderful exhibitions that no one has been able to see. I think maybe 2 people outside of Luke and I and the staff have seen his work. So I'm really happy to finally be able to share Luke's work through a virtual tour. So that will be fun. It's my first virtual tour, so hopefully all goes well. Before we start, I just wanted to confirm that everyone's mic is muted, so don't worry about having to turn that off. We are using closed captioning today, as you might see at the bottom of your screen. If you want to turn it off, or if you want to make it bigger, you can right-click at the bottom of your screen on the closed captioning icon and change it there. We do have the Q&A function, so please submit your questions throughout the talk. We'll see how it goes. We might answer them as Luke and I talk, or at the end, we'll see. And then the webinar is being recorded and will be posted online at a later date. And then feel free to tag us while you watch. I have our Twitter and Instagram feed there. And then finally, I'd really like to thank the Varley Mackay Art Foundation of Markham, who supports our Lunch and Learn and makes these virtual talks possible, as well as the City of Markham, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Department of Canadian Heritage. So that's it for me. I'll turn it over to Luke to introduce himself as I turn on the virtual tour. So take it over.
Hi, so we'll get started?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, my name is Luke Parnell. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm from Luxgeek clan. I'm from Wilpsquagans, and my Nisga'a name is Gao Galgan, which means always carving. Yeah, so I've been a professional artist for maybe 20 years now, I think, quite a while. I don't know, the time flies. And yeah, I originally went to school for sculpture in the late 90s at OCAD. My first year was OCA, second year was OCAD. And then I went back in 2007 to get my bachelor's degree, because back in the 90s, they just give out diplomas. And that was really when I started making what I would call art that I was really proud of, is after like 2008, 2009. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I did some carving before then, but I mean, it was just after 2010 is when I really started using all my training, both as a carver, but also as a from an academic standpoint. Yeah, and then I went a few years later, I went to Emily Carr and got my Master's of Applied Arts. And for the last few years, I've been teaching at OCAD University in the sculpture installation department. Yeah, and in there was also an apprenticeship with Master Shimshan carver Henry Green, and I learned a lot from him. It was he's a really great teacher. And yeah, I guess that's my introduction. I can't think of anything else.
How long were you doing your apprenticeship?
I apprenticed for 3 years, and that was actually I guess in the early 2000s, mid 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, early 2000s. I apprenticed with Henry for 3 years. Then I was I was a professional artist in Vancouver for like a year, and then I decided I didn't want to be a professional Northwest Coast artist. I didn't want to just sort of make masks and bowls and rattles and things for commercial galleries. I wanted to make my own stuff, and that's why I decided to go back and get my bachelor's degree, was because I wanted to learn how to, just sort of learn how to, sort of do more of what I wanted to do. Like I needed time.
And
Because when you're
we'll touch a bit about that, because I think this idea of the commercial market and something more personal and conceptual is something that I find really interesting in your career, and hopefully we can talk a bit about that as we go.
Sure.
So we've been working on this project, I think, for 2 years now, and it's evolved over those past 2 years to come to this installation. So the title, Repeat the Chorus 3 Times, is the title of the piece, and then each individual works have their own title. So as we go through, we'll talk about it, we'll answer some questions, and hopefully it's not too jarring, the virtual tour. I also want to say that we'll have an extended essay by Lisa Myers published very soon in a digital and hopefully a print brochure as well. So I want to thank Lisa, who I think is on the video call today, for her hard work on that essay.
We should have Lisa in the talk too. I didn't even think of that.
Maybe that's for another time.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you start by talking about this first piece that we're looking at?
Okay, first I'll talk about the first one's called The First Beat, Common Gift, but Lisa reminded me of something in her essay and where this piece actually came from. And so these boxes were originally made for an installation for the Vancouver Children's Festival. I can't remember what year it was, but and so they asked me to do a piece, and it was supposed to be interactive so that the kids could play with it. And so I thought I'd make these like 3 box drums, and I made a bunch of drumsticks. Even though you don't usually play box drum with a stick, but I didn't want the kids like breaking their thumbs like banging on it. So I made a bunch of drumsticks, and I had to make new ones every day because they kept breaking them because they were wailing on it. It was really awesome, and it wasn't painted then. I just had I got these archived images of Indigenous people in BC throughout sort of historical archive photos. And that's sort of where the basis of like the different, like the small drum had like pictures of children at a cannery, and the medium-sized drum had like a woman working in the cannery as well, I think. And then the large one had it was actually a picture from Brenda Crabtree gave me a picture of, it was her dad and his uncle, and her dad was like a little boy, and that's the picture I put on the outside of the big drum. And that was super amazing. What's that?
Sorry, were those glued on, or did you paint them?
Yeah, they were just glued on. Just glued on. And so that was during the festival, and it was really amazing. The kids loved it, and actually they had to like limit the amount of time that the kids could play with it because it was like annoying all the store owners, because the kids were just wailing on it nonstop. And I just thought it was really great. It was really fun, and it was meant to be fun, and sort of a way of like sort of kids sort of interacting with these cultural items that they can actually touch and play with. But that was only for 4 days, and they paid me, they gave me a nice check for it, and it was awesome. But once it was done, it was done. It was like I had these 3 drums. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. And they actually sat around for quite a few years. I knew I wanted to do something with them, so that's the reason I'm telling the story, is because oftentimes when I come up with an idea for a piece, I have the idea first, and then I think about the materials I'm going to use and what I'm going to need to sort of develop my idea. But I've done this before, and with boxes as well for some reason. But I had these 3 boxes, and so I had to have the idea come out of the boxes. So that's why it took so long, because I couldn't think of anything that would really work for the piece. And as you well know, like I had a bunch of different ideas, like everything was just flowing. And so it was really sort of, I'm not going to say it was organic, because I had to actually like sit down and really sort of develop the idea. So it wasn't just sort of like, everything just sort of flowed. there was a lot of starts and stops, and there were some ideas I had that just never went anywhere. So it took a long time. So that's the background of the actual wood.
And so these are the same boxes that you had at
Yeah.
the festival? Okay.
And I think it's important to tell that story because if you see them, I don't know if anyone will actually get to see them live. But if you actually see them live, they're kind of banged up. Like you can see the wear and tear in the wood, which is excellent. And I wanted to keep that.
I wanted to see that in. I think the second one you can kind of see at the edges.
Yeah. So yeah, it was so they did, you know, even though the paint is all new, it does look sort of well used as well. So I'll talk about the first piece now. This first piece is called First Beat, Common Gift. And so it sort of comes down to the idea of the piece, and this I always sort of it started actually with the middle box was the first piece that I sort of visualized, but it's sort of this idea of like, and it's the second box is called what we take with us. I'll talk about that in a minute, but the idea is like balance between, you know, what we get from our ancestors. You know, we get our culture and so on and so forth, but we also get trauma, like that's also passed to us, and sort of life is always sort of about negotiating these, you know, and trying to sort of, you know, recognize the trauma and but not let it sort of hold us back and sort of cling on to the culture. And so the first piece is actually, and I say it's always the only drum you can actually play. You can play the other two, they just sound really sort of higher pitched and really, I don't think it's good. My friend Francis played the middle one and he's like, I think this one sounds good. It's not that I disagree with him. I just think the big one sounds better. It's a better size. There's more space inside the drum to make like a deeper sound. Mm-hmm. And so I always say, so this is the only one that you could actually play. And so I wanted this one to be like the sort of positive and the cultural side. And I'm half Haida, half Nishka, and both Haidas and Nishkas are matrilineal. So because this is about the culture that's passed down, I made sure it was about my grandmother's. And so the one we're looking at now is the eagle design. And that's for my grandmother, Frida Stewart. And then on the other side is a raven design. And that's for my grandmother, Sophie Parnell. Yeah, and so the idea, and so there's the raven design. And the reason the raven design is so basic, and actually they have the same base, like the basis of the design is exactly the same. I just sort of changed the scale. And I mean, the reason that the raven design is so sort of sparse is that I'm a right-handed, so I would play this side of the drum. Okay. And I wanted it to be sort of sparse so that like when I played it, like because the paint will start chipping off, and I wanted something that I could easily repaint. And so when because I'm also the eagle clan as well, and so that's why I wanted the eagle design facing out and the raven design facing in, and sort of me playing the raven side and the eagle side sticking out. And on the inside, I you know, it's a bit on the nose, but I actually just made a giant eye. And it was sort of, like Lisa said in the article, I have this like print by my friend Stormy, and it says our ancestors can see what we do or something like that. Ancestors are watching us. I saw this idea of like, you know, that our ancestors are watching us. And so when we're playing the drum, you know, they can see what we're doing. And I'm sure I could have said that more poetically, but not that poetic.
Can you talk a bit about when we did the maquette? I still do kind of a paper maquette for the floor plan. You were really adamant that this is the first one. And I think like also reading Lisa's essay, we both kind of saw it as a, you know, this is the start and then it goes. Can you talk a bit about that? Because that's not always the case. I mean, they kind of work together. As we kind of go through each one, we'll see how they go together, and, you know, kind of like a song adds to the story.
Yeah, I think because they actually the three drums are meant to balance each other. You know, with the center drum being sort of like the what do you call it? The
base anchor.
Not the anchor. The you know, where like something sort of balances. Anyway.
Oh yes.
Anyway, I can move on. And so I wanted the the big drum first, because that represents the culture and sort of our long history. And so it's really important in the sense that, in a sense that it's sort of where we sort of originally come from. And it's also like the sort of positive, the sort of like, sort of in storytelling, I always feel like I like to start with, to bring people into the story, make it easy for people to enter the piece.
Can you talk a bit about that, the idea of storytelling? I think Lisa phrased it really well on this idea of stories and your approach to telling stories, especially cultural stories, and maybe your hesitancy or kind of the
So
that you went through.
yeah, so probably like 15 years, I wouldn't use traditional stories in my work. Maybe 14 years. I wouldn't use any traditional stories in my work. It's just because like when I started studying Northwest Coast art, when I started apprenticing with Henry, I started studying it, like reading a lot about it, and studying the pieces. And we'd always have these talks, and I'd look at this artwork and I show it to Henry, and he'd be like, "Oh, that was done by a white guy, or that was done by a Filipino guy," and it was sort of like, and it was just sort of this idea that most of the Northwest Coast carvers were kind of like, well, yeah, non-Indigenous people make our art, but there's nothing we can do about it. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's okay, they deserve our respect and stuff like that. And so it's because it's really controversial. Like anytime you question, not anytime, but most times when you question like a non-native person making Northwest Coast art, a lot of Indigenous artists will defend them. So it's pretty strong. And so I started making the artwork, and I was like, I don't want to, it's bad enough that the formal aspects of the artwork are so widely appropriated. And I've always had this idea, I wasn't able to sort of talk about it in any sort of words, but I always known there was like sort of an intangible piece to Northwest Coast art that was really important. And so I wanted to protect it. So I wouldn't use any traditional stories in my work for that reason, and not because I didn't love them, and not because I didn't want to. Because if you look at a lot of the, most of the artwork is based on traditional stories, and it's very rich, and it has a very rich history. And when you work with those stories, you're also working with a lineage of other storytellers. And so, but that was sort of thought about that in retrospect. Like at the time, I was excited about making up my own stories. And like, so some of the pieces I did, I've actually written stories, like, like pen to paper, and created artworks based on the stories. And other times I've sort of worked with contemporary history. So still using our stories, but nothing traditional, or, like the Haida Repatriation Project and reconciliation and so on and so forth. And also using emotion in some of my work. Earlier work, it was sort of about where my head was and so on, and things like that.
So still using formalin, but it's
the
content behind it and the meaning that's different.
Yeah, still using formalin.
And so what made you change your mind on that?
I think it's because you just started thinking about your own heritage, and and like I said, like you look at these old stories and you see the pieces that are being made, and it's just like, the stories are so rich, and they're so much a part of my life, and also the stories were also developed alongside formalin. So formalin was developed alongside of these stories, and so I was making formalin, I wasn't using stories, and it felt like I was sort of like cheating myself of this opportunity. And also, like I said, and I've said a million times, I love the stories. Like the Bear Mother is one of my favorite stories, and I think that's because a lot of my earlier work was about transformation, and so Bear Mother has a lot of transformation in it. And so I've always really loved that story, and I would actually use that story a lot when I was teaching back in the day. And so now and then for a while I would just hint at traditional stories. Now I just use them because I just think they're great, and I enjoy using them.
Okay, so one last question, and then we'll dig a bit more into this one. How much room is there in formalin to experiment or expand or create your own visual?
It's unlimited. It depends on who you ask. For me, I think it's unlimited. Some people think there's certain ways a ovoid should be shaped, and there's certain ways like forms you should use, and you shouldn't use this, shouldn't use that. But in my opinion, I like what I do, and I do believe that there's benefit to learning how to use the forms traditionally, like, but to know it. But people don't have, people always talk about learning from a master and learning how and why the way things are supposed to be used. Like I remember I got in this big argument on Facebook, and I was teaching at the time, so I didn't want to say what I really wanted to say, because everything I say sort of reflects on the institutions I work for. And so I've always sort of kept my mouth shut, because I didn't want anything sort of negative to go back to Emily Carr, or when I was teaching there, or OCAD when I was teaching there. But there was so much gatekeeping. Or talking about how like young Native artists should have to learn from masters, and they shouldn't go to school to learn art, and it's not real Native art if they didn't learn from like the community. And it just really annoyed me, because it was like, not everybody has an opportunity. Like people, for someone to say that is so like privileged, such a privileged statement to say you learn from an elder, when if somebody grows up in a city, or even if they grow up in another part of the country, it isn't even necessarily a city, or you know what I mean? Like there's, like everybody's, like our stories are so wide now. Like the indigenous experience is so varied that you can't. I don't think so. This is all my opinion. I don't think you can say that. Like I think people have to come to the art in their own way.
And do you think that moving to Ontario affected that, like being away from British Columbia?
Not really. I needed to. I mean, I went home and I did apprentice with a master carver, but and it was important for me. But I came from a different generation where all of these resources weren't available to me. Like cultural resources weren't available to me. Like right now, you can learn a bit of Indigenous languages online, and you can learn. And there's all these sort of books that have been done by people, and there's you find songs, like, so there's opportunities for people to learn all about the culture, their own culture, without having to go home. But for me, it was important for me to come to Ontario when I was very young. I was very sort of, I've basically been on my own since I was 15, and for the most part, and I sort of have always been sort of a wanderer. And when I came to Ontario the first time, it was important that I leave BC. Like I just need to get my head straight.
That's a really great segue into this piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we'll see on the back. So why don't we jump into this piece, starting with the front.
So this one's called Only What You Take With You. And this one was really the first drum that I developed. And it is also an eagle design, because it would be me carrying the pack. Can we go around to the other side? Yep. And there's two little beavers in the eyes, beaver designs. And it's because the main subcrest is beaver holding a broken stick.
About to see this.
Yeah.
The sides.
Yeah, right there. So this piece originally came from the idea of the cave. And I remember and it also came from Star Wars. Like, the only way you take with you is what Yoda says to Luke Skywalker before he goes into the cave. And he meets this sort of Force beaver dream of his father. And then it's actually himself. So he's not, he thinks he's fighting Luke. He thinks his main enemy it's actually himself. And sort of that's what Yoda's trying to sort of tell him. And Luke doesn't get it. He still goes after Vader.
I love that you're referencing Star Wars right now.
So he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand that, had to. And so this one is actually sort of about my father as well, and this idea that I, didn't have quite a complicated relationship. And so, really, when it comes down to it, though, I really sort of have to, I'm the person I have to deal with. And so this idea, this one has a lot of pop cultural references. And this, like I said, this is the idea, only way you take with you. And this is really the balance between the two pieces, in a sense that the big drum is all about culture and the smaller drum is all about trauma. And this is the balance. This one has both culture and trauma in it, in the sense that the outside is like, you have a drum on your back, which means you're basically taking your culture with you and carrying it. But inside there's like a red figure. And that was meant to be sort of like like a fetus in a sense of the sort of idea of like this trauma that you sort of carry with you that is always with you, and it starts from when you're young, and you just sort of always carry it with you, and you sort of have to, I don't think you can stop carrying your trauma. I think you just have to learn how to carry your trauma.
Mm. And I think, especially looking at the images, because in the gallery it's a bit different, you really get this feeling of the boxes being carrying, but also caring for these figures, which is quite powerful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the virtual tour is great, but it's too well lit.
Yeah, I know.
Like if you see in the gallery, it's not as well lit inside the boxes, so it sort of adds something. That the lighting adds something. But the virtual tour is great. It's better than just photos, I think.
Can you talk a bit about the backpack and how it might relate to what's the name of the work? What you carry with you? Is that no the video you made and how you see these two works kind of
remediation.
Yeah,
the idea of carrying your culture with you, like they both sort of came from the same idea. I think it's so funny, like you said, I've had these boxes for a long time, and they both sprung out of the same idea at the same time, basically. So I made the original idea was I was going to do this, actually just a sculpture, this giant like ego sculpture with all these like different little carvings on it, and it would probably weigh like 50 pounds or 60 pounds, and there'd be a backpack attached, and you'd sort of carry it with you. Then I got the idea to make the film Remediation, and then I sort of adopted the idea from that first piece for Remediation. And then when I was developing this piece, I was like, you know what, I can do that with the box actually as well, because they sort of have the same sort of meaning. And so, like I said, both ideas came out of one idea that I never made. So I guess if I wanted to do a triptych, I could do the actual first idea.
I'm guessing this is a bit lighter than the pole that you cut in half.
Yeah, quite a bit lighter. The pole was actually, the pole was 40 pounds. Okay. I hollowed it out quite a bit, so it wasn't too bad, but it got heavy after 3 days though. And yeah, so this one's probably like 15 pounds tops. Because even the backpack I'm using for this piece is different than the one I used for the pole. And this backpack is probably weighs half or maybe 1/3 the weight of the other backpack, and the wood in this box is quite thin, like it's 1/2 inch thick. So it's quite thin.
And again, like something that we're not quite getting here is everything that you've added kind of to the backpack, which I think is really important and adds to that storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, like I added a carving knife and a couple of paintbrushes. The actual paintbrushes I used to paint all 3 pieces. I just let them dry out with the wood on them. I mean, with the paint on them. I just wanted to show the idea that this, like I said, this is the balance between the two, and and in many ways it's a self-portrait, and I just sort of wanted people to recognize that there's sort of this piece is also about what isn't there, and what isn't there is the person who carries the backpack. Like yeah.
When the pandemic first hit, this absence of people is what kind of hit me the most, because when we talked about the drum, I've always imagined someone playing it, or someone like the sound associated with it. And as it's sitting in the gallery by itself, there's definitely something missing. But so I do hope, fingers crossed, that we'll soon be out of this third wave.
Yeah. We remember the third piece. The third piece is the last one I did. Remember that one? That idea developed a lot.
Yeah.
You remember the original idea was going to be like a speaker.
Exactly.
And I was going to have music playing coming out of it, but that idea just wasn't. It was an idea.
I guess maybe it just wasn't needed in the end.
No, it wasn't needed, and it wasn't. I really started to feel like silence was more important than sound. And also there's, I don't like using music too much because there's a lot of protocol that comes with music, songs. I have to write my own songs. I don't really know how to write music, so.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about that.
Yeah. Like I have a whole piece I was going to do before called 8-1, which was going to be a sound-based installation. And I can't write music, so I just never did the piece.
It would have been a great piece. I definitely encourage you to.
Yeah, I mean, I was supposed to use these box drums for that piece.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen.
These things where, the big piece would have been in the larger gallery, would have been, something else. But I think when it's scaled down and now it's in our introductory gallery, it seems like nobody would have known. It was like that the whole time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let me show you the inside.
Yeah, so this is one I struggled with quite a bit. And the title is Third Beat, Waiting for the Call This Is a Swum. That's a line from a Tribe Called Red song. And I wanted to sort of talk about this idea of sort of this trauma that, we have to sort of endure as Indigenous people in this country. And so this was also called The Black Box. And so I had a lot, just like I said, this was the last piece to do and the last piece to develop. I really struggled with this piece. And a lot of things I struggled with too is like, there's references to missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I almost felt like I don't know if, because I'm not a woman, I didn't know if I could sort of tell that story. So I didn't want to disrespect anybody. But I had this idea and I felt like I had to do it. But I did struggle with it quite a bit, like a lot, like for probably months. I didn't know if I was going to do this piece the way I did it. And then inside the mask is actually a dogfish woman mask from various Haida stories. So it's basically a shark woman. Yeah, and the reason I say it's balanced is because even though this is the smallest drum, it's like, I think it's the heaviest, very emotionally. And so the other ones actually have to be bigger just to sort of balance with the power that the black drum has. And like I said, of all three, this one was the most struggle. I always worry about, when telling stories, I always worry about telling other people's stories, the wrong way. And, and sort of coming off as being disrespectful, and I really don't want to be disrespectful.
I understand that.
Yeah, so it was a hard drum to do, but I had to do it. I did it. If you're a storyteller, you have to tell stories. It's even sometimes
it just affects you in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm going to show a behind view from this angle, which is a completely different view of it, but I think a good kind of, as you exit the gallery, you get to kind of.
This side is so much more stark, eh?
I know.
Like, look at the difference. It's crazy. That's excellent. I never noticed that before.
Yeah, and I think what works well in the gallery is that when you walk in and you see the colorful side, and then you go through all the other rooms, and then you come back with a different understanding of it when you exit, I think is pretty successful as well.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with a few questions? I'll try to keep the tour in the background. Oh, Juanita wants to know, can we watch this again? Of course, it is being recorded. It's just when we'll be able to post it. So definitely you'll be able to watch that. Oops, done. So from Aaron Candela, do you have some favorite contemporary Indigenous artists that you'd like to highlight? I think your points about gatekeeping education boundaries within the dissemination of Indigenous art are interesting. So maybe start with the first part. Do you have any artists that you look to or are inspired by?
Well, I'm inspired by a lot of artists, but Indigenous artists. I think I always think about, going through your question about like form line and how it can be expanded. I always think about someone like Sonia Sue.
Mm-hmm.
I think who makes amazing artwork, and I love his stuff.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'd love to buy some of them someday. Sonia Sue, obviously look up Henry Green. I mean, I think he's
Mm-hmm.
he's an amazing Shipshan carver, and definitely one of the greats. And I think he hasn't had any like books or anything written about him, so people don't know who he is, but he's amazing. Check out Dempsey Bob.
Mm.
That's sort of that's the older generation. For the younger generation, like Alison Bremner does some really amazing work. Luann Neal.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm trying to think who else. I look at so many artists. It's hard for me to like pick just one or two that I like because I like them all. Yeah, carvers like Phil Gray, who's just like probably I think one of the best technical artists, one of those coast artists in the world. Technically speaking, his work is just spot on for sure. Lyle Campbell, who's also a friend of mine, who I worked with in the past. He's hired me to work with him probably 10 years ago now. I hate to say, but it feels like not that long ago, but it was years ago. And he's also a really nice guy and just really generous person who does amazing artwork. Yeah, I'm probably forgetting people who are really important. And just doing these things is a little nerve wracking, so it's hard to remember everybody's name.
So Aaron also asks, do you think that Indigenous artists who seek participation in the contemporary art scene get pushback, perhaps from both ends? And maybe what can organizations do to help?
Actually, I don't even know, to be honest. I'd say yes, but from my perspective, but not like everybody's very polite. So no, there's no like comic book villains where they're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna stop that person." But everybody's very polite. Like even the criticism I've gotten from Northwest Coast has been very polite. And sort of in contemporary work, there's always that sort of idea. It's hard to say because I haven't really gone out and tried to get into shows.
Yeah, I mean it's so hard. It's such a hard question to answer.
Yeah, like, different. And I can't speak to a young person's experience either because I'm not young. Yeah. And I'm so, and I don't know what their experience is like. I mean, I've seen stuff on Twitter where they get really angry, but most of them it's more about like a lot of the people I follow on Twitter and so on and so forth have other issues that sort of get in their other roadblocks that get in their way with sort of their sexuality and gender based and so on and so forth like that. Mm-hmm. And so and there's also the Indigenous stuff, but I mean I think those issues are quite more important to a lot of young Indigenous artists.
Oh, this is a great question from Marianne Alberga. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing. Can Luke talk a bit about the influence of comics, graffiti, and popular culture in his work?
Sure. Yes, they influence my work. Just kidding.
You don't have to go into more detail than that.
All right. Yeah, as far as like influence on my artwork, it's always fairly organic, in a sense that whatever I love sort of ends up being on my work. Like I love to hike, and a lot of my work ends up being about traveling, and also comic books and movies and so on and so forth find their ways in a lot of my work, and sometimes it's hidden. And like I've done prints where like I made reference, nobody would know, but if you looked at when I tell people and they could see it, they'd know it's there. But if I didn't tell them, they would think it was some sort of Indigenous thing. But like I did this print and I made a reference to Cybermen and Jimmy Madrox, the Multiple Man, who's an X-Men. And so they find their ways in, and sometimes it's cheeky like that, and sometimes it's actually like the basis of an idea, like for the center box, where sort of a third of the idea came from The Empire Strikes Back.
What I realized was that whenever I would go to do a studio visit for this show, we'd end up talking about other things like games or stuff like that, and then I'd leave and I'm like, oh no, I don't know what the Raven, like where about the details of the Raven, I forgot to ask. So I think that's a pretty great question.
Yeah, and also color. Like I've been working a lot with color lately, and I'm really taking a lot of it from film and comic books. And so that's sort of where I'm learning how the color theory. And when I say color theory, I'm not studying color theory. What I'm actually looking at is, like I remember when I was back in school, like when I took a painting class and they're like, and we're all quite young, and someone asked the teacher like, how can we sort of figure out what colors go together? And he's like, go in a magazine and take out an advertisement and look at the colors they use in that one page advertising. He's like, and use it in the work, and then you'll see that the colors sort of balance with each other and they sort of work together. And so that's sort of what I'm doing right now with color. I'm taking like film, like scenes, like a film still, and looking at the color and a film still, and using that for a painting, or using those colors for a painting, for comic book pages as well. Take like a splash page, and nice thing about doing digital drawings too is I can actually take the color, like literally grab the color and use it.
This is me there was a request to give us a tour from the starting of the entrance going around the space. I'm trying to do that as we answer the questions. So the questions are starting to pour in, so let's get to them. So other than the disruptions to installing this exhibition during the pandemic, how has your practice or this exhibition been impacted by COVID?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, I'm showing this work, and this is brand new work. And I was actually talking with Anik yesterday because we did sort of like a run through and had a little chat. And I was saying like, this work is new to me. Like, I don't even know this work yet. Like I haven't been able to see it, and it's brand new. So I haven't gotten to spend any time with it. And this is the first time I'm actually talking about it. Mm-hmm. And so I was saying how important that is. Like I had another brand new piece. Well, it wasn't new. I made it years ago, but I had never really shown it, which was Neon Reconciliation Explosion. And I did a lot of interviews for that show, the Bill Reed show. And people were asking me all these questions. And then I realized that like I didn't know all the answers yet. Like I was actually learning about the piece as I was talking about it. And so that's one of the reasons I was excited to talk about this piece. So maybe I'd learn about it a bit more. And Lisa wrote about it, and she's such a great writer, and like I was so like I read it and I was like, oh my god, that sounds awesome.
Did I make this?
Yeah, it was but it was nice even just because Lisa had interviewed me a bunch of times throughout the process, and she's one of my sounding boards, like when I talk about my work, and so she had heard about this piece for a long time, and so she sort of wrote about my process a bit, and I was like, oh, that's so amazing to like look at my own process, and because when I'm in it, like I'm not thinking about
of course,
where the idea is developing or where it came from. I'm just thinking about where it is now. And so I can't really see I can't see the trees for the forest for the trees sometimes when I'm making things.
Does it take years sometimes for it to come through?
Yeah, sometimes. This one took years. But sometimes it does. But look at, sometimes it takes years, and then sometimes it's just like when I talk about organic, sometimes it's just organic. Like one of the pieces I did for my grad show, like I said, which was also like 9 years ago, like that piece just flew. Like I bought the wood and had my tools, and that was basically done in like 2 weeks. It is a great piece, but sometimes the ideas just flow, and sometimes and like I said, like with Neon Reconciling Explosion, that was organic in the sense that it did take a long time to develop, but that was more me wondering what I should do, like not what I can do, but not what I should do, whether or not I should do it. And so, but that idea was, that was really organic and that flew. Whereas this one, as you well know, like this one took forever. Like this one was a struggle.
You came through.
I love it.
Like through it,
Yeah, I'm glad it took so much time because I'm really happy with it now.
Oh, I'm glad. So a comment from Marcia: the emotion in the work comes through very strongly. I think I would cry if I saw the work live. That's lovely.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, so a couple of more. There's a lovely experience of peering into or over the works to discover the object's surprising and strong interiority. Can Luke talk to that experience of outside inside, especially with the third work? And you kind of touched upon that when you commented on the lighting. So this idea of like the viewer having to, look in and experience the work from that angle.
Yeah, because it's actually kind of dark inside the boxes.
Yeah.
Like it's so it's sort of and that sort of experience sort of adds to it. I mean, like I said, I don't mind this virtual tour because it's so cool, but in real life, like these objects are in 3-dimensional space, so you have to walk around them and you can sort of experience them. And I always think about them as like, it's like walking around a person. Like you understand that the person has like what you see and what's inside, and that's sort of what these boxes are like. And it's not necessarily, this sort of idea of like material versus intangible, because it's all material, but it sort of reflects that sort of belief in my work. This idea that there's what you see on the outside, and then there's what's on the inside as well.
Another comment from Marianne. I'm also interested in hearing him talk a bit about the importance of his sense of humor in relation to the tension and weight of personal and historical traumas and struggle he has been referring to. So is that something that comes up?
Sometimes, I mean, not so much in this work, but it can, like with Remediation, the film, like there's quite a bit of humor in that film. It's supposed to be humorous. The idea of me walking, there's a lot of me walking with that thing on my back, and it's supposed to be humorous. But a lot of times it's like from I remember watching this artist talk by oh my god, of course I'm gonna forget his name. He did Haida Manga, Michael Nicol Yagulanis.
Yes.
And he talks about like when he was sitting outside of like I forget where he's working. He's working at a museum, and he was sitting outside on the grass having lunch, and there was like a totem pole there, and one of the kids was playing around, and the mother like shushed him, like, don't show respect, and sort of this idea. And he's like, some of these things were done for humor purposes. Like some of our ceremonies were fun as well. They weren't meant to be all taken completely serious, but people don't know. Like people just are scared to like laugh. And so that's sort of why I did in the Remediation, I have myself walking for so long, is because I wanted to see if people would be scared to laugh. But I think people just don't understand, or they're just kind of like, why is he still walking? Like, because I think they think it's supposed to be serious. I mean, it ends in something very serious, but I'm also trying to sort of have fun on the journey as well.
So we have a serious question, so we'll see how we get with that. So at the start of the talk, you said you get culture from your ancestors, but you also get trauma. And so I guess the question talks about the responsibility that you might think representing trauma from a personal perspective, as opposed to kind of a wider cultural perspective, and how you deal with that. I mean, you touched a bit upon it with the last box, but if there's something you wanted to add more to that struggle, or not.
Think about the like with the pieces, and sort of like I always talk about sort of, I can do it, but should I do it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a struggle that I sort of deal with, and that's why some of these pieces take so long. But the struggle is all in the studio. Oh, excuse me. Like once I'm done a piece, like it's sort of out there. But yeah, I feel responsibility. That's why it takes me so long to do some of these things. I mean, Neon Reconciliation Explosion sat there for a year because I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and what it is now is exactly what I wanted it to be. But it took me a whole year to decide that I could do it. With the reference to Tina Fontaine and Colton Bushi, because I didn't want to be disrespectful, and so so it took me a whole year to finally finish that piece because of that. But the piece was done a year before it was done. I just wasn't sure if I should do it. So yeah, I take it very seriously. It's fraught. I could end up being disrespectful because I can't see everything. But it's just something I sort of, this is sort of the work that I want to make. And these are the ideas that I come up with. So I have to sort of like work with that and try to work around it and try to figure out a way to do it, because, this is where my mind goes.
Be honest with your own, or kind
Yeah,
of your own.
to be honest.
Yeah. I think that, you know, the process and this idea of process becomes very important. And how we talked about yesterday about the work where you worked with community members or like children in Toronto to paint the reconciliation work. And we talked a bit about, you know, what was the goal or the idea, like you didn't ask them when they started what they thought about reconciliation, but it was through the process of painting that was the key part for the work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was like I said, when I asked them to paint a panel, I just asked them to sort of think about what reconciliation means to them, and then paint the panel. And then when I was being interviewed, someone asked me like, well, so what was the answer? Like, what did people discover what reconciliation meant to them? And I tried to answer it. I gave some answer. I don't even know what I said. Like, it wasn't a very good answer, I don't think. But I had to think about it. And then afterwards I realized like, well, the painting is the answer. Like, the painting is the document. Like, it's not, I can't give a, you know, I can't give an answer for the people. They did answer, it's right there. And I didn't realize that until somebody asked me that question. And it's so amazing. Like, now I'm like, wow, what a great question. Like, that really, it was just an off the cuff question, but it actually meant a lot to me in the end because it really made me think about the piece, which is what I mean about like looking at new work, like not, you know, like there's a saying by Bonnie Divine, sometimes our work is smarter than us. And, you know, I really believe that, like, I really believe that, you know, we're using our, you know, our conscious mind to make peace, but there's also our subconscious mind as well.
And that the answer might not, either it might not come or it'll take some time to, the answer to the question, I mean.
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes. Okay, some more questions. Definitely send in more questions.
Yeah.
Hi, Luke, you said you've also written your own story for your artwork. Did you create any totems or elements from your own story? Like,
yeah, if you go on my blog, or if you look up my like thesis from Emily Carr, it's called the convergence of intangible and material, or something like that. I can't remember. It's 10 years ago. Look up Luke Parnell, convergence of intangible and material, and you'll get my thesis for my master's degree. And there's a story in there that I wrote, and I created 3 artworks based on that story. And if you read the thesis, it actually goes through my process of creating the pieces and sort of my whole philosophy on art making. Yeah. So it's really a document about my process and so on and so forth. And that one was really fun. Like, that was a really fun project.
I'll look for the, I'll just stop the sharing so I can look for the link for the blog.
Yeah, it'd be an Emily Carr. I mean, the thesis would be an Emily Carr website, and the blog is called Haida Nishka Totem Poles, I think. When I made that blog, a friend of mine, David Himmel, helped me set it up. We wanted to make it like as broad as possible, but still sort of recognizing that it's mine. So we got like Haida, Nishka, and totem poles, so like whatever people would be searching.
Okay. We don't have a chat function, but I hope people will be, oh, there you go. Thank you. Somebody has posted it already in the Q&A.
Nice.
Any other questions, or Luke, something that you think we haven't touched upon about the work?
I don't know. I guess, you know, the show comes down in a couple of weeks, right?
Well, so we have a tentative end date of May 14th, so about a month from now. But we'll kind of wait and see how it goes. Hopefully we can extend it a little bit more.
Hopefully, you know, we don't know. I mean, I'm not hopeful. I think the lockdown is going to go further till it actually gets warm.
Yeah.
And
maybe I'm a bit more optimistic.
More people get vaccinated. So I guess if you want to see the work, I don't know.
But we will try to post the virtual tour soon. There's just some small technical challenges we have to.
So, you know, I hate to say this for the Varley Gallery event, but you're probably gonna have to wait till it's shown somewhere else to see the work. Which is really unfortunate. Like, we've been working on this for 2 years, and it was all really exciting, and it was finally happening, and then it got pushed back like a year, like 6 months too, right?
It did, yeah.
8 months, like, so it's really disappointing. But I mean, you know, what can you do? It's good. It's yeah, it's work I'm really proud of, and I hope people get to see it. And I don't know, if you're a curator out there, put it in the show.
Yes, I
Like,
agree. Luke is wonderful to work with. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this project with us. And hopefully, you know, we'll definitely be sharing the virtual tour and the publication when it's available. Kate Carter, thank you so much, Luke, and thank you, Anik and the Varley, for organizing this talk. It's very nice. Thanks, Kate. Any other questions? So what's next for you?
Well, I took like a leave of absence from my job, so I'll spend the next year or so making art. I'm working on a commission right now for a private commission, a giant painting for some people. And so as soon as I'm done this semester, like I have to do some grading and finish up the semester. I'm already drawing the piece for them, but I'll start painting it. And that should be exciting because I haven't really painted in a long time. I've just been doing digital and carving for the last couple of years. So that'll be fun. So I'm excited about that. And after that, I'm just gonna get some stuff going. I'm gonna get my YouTube channel going. I'm gonna do some videos and
great.
Based on those animations that I make. Yeah. And I'm working on a few other things. Like I said, I'm working on a game. I'm developing a card game.
Very excited.
And you know, I'm gonna get, and I'll get a few other things. I got some prints made. I'm gonna maybe get, I don't know, get Etsy or something. So I have prints. I'm gonna get more prints made, and yeah. So I'm really sort of trying to make it go as a professional artist.
And you have another talk coming up at the end of April?
Oh yeah, on the 28th for the Bill Reed Gallery, and that's actually a more general talk about my whole practice. So the talk on the 28th will be about my whole career.
So that'll be great because we've mentioned a lot of works during the talk, and we didn't have images to show. But if people want to join, could they go on the Bill Reed website?
Yeah, just go to the Bill Reed website, register. And I was supposed to do that one live in the gallery, but obviously we can't. And so, and that show ends on, I think, May 7th or May 7th or something. So we're not going to get to see that. I'm not going to get to go out there. And so I just canceled altogether. I just say, let's just take visiting off the table because I'm tired of like looking forward to things and then canceling them.
I know.
Like, I'm so sick of it. So I'm just not planning anything until the end of summer now because I'm just tired of being disappointed. Like, it's really disappointing. So I'm just not going to plan anything but stay in Toronto and carve.
Are galleries open in Vancouver?
Yeah.
Okay. So I know
I don't think they are right now, but they have been.
Okay. I see there's some West Coast people joining us today from the Yukon also. So hi to our West Coast visitors.
Minus 25 up there the other day.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's man. Crazy.
No, it's so cold.
We're
fortunate in Toronto.
Sorry?
We're really fortunate right now.
I know. Oh man, on top of the pandemic, minus 25. I don't know if I could handle that. Well, thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Luke, for joining me and walking us through your exhibition, your installation virtually. It's been really great working with you, and I really hope we get to share this project more widely.
Thanks.
So I will end it. So please, you can follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. So as soon as we get information on a possible reopening or when our publication becomes available, there'll be.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. On Instagram, I'm Lucifer10. That's Lucifer, but a K instead of a C. And then and my Twitter is just Northwest Coast Carver.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then to close off, stunning work, Luke. Thank you both. Thank you, Linda, for joining us. And that's it for us. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.